Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are actually talking about the European Union because the EU is poised to break up big tech dominance. This is surprising. Here's what's going on. It's coming from CNBC, and I think this is a potential game changer for all of the large or massive organizations out there. Think Google, Facebook, etc. Here's what's going on. The European Union agreed on landmark new antitrust regulations that could reshape the business models of US technology giants like Meta, aka Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, etc., very dramatically. Now, these rules are expected to come into force as early as October, assuming they are voted and ratified on. Here's what's going on. The European Parliament and EU member states this past yesterday, reached a historic deal on the Digital Markets Act, or DMA, which is a sweeping set of rules aimed at curbing the market power of firms with a tight grip on the internet economy. Now, these rules will apply to the so-called quote-unquote gatekeepers. These are tech companies with market caps of at least 75 billion euros, or 83 billion US, or annual revenues within the EU of at least 7.5 billion euros, roughly 8.3 million, in the past 3 years. Now, they must also have at least 45 million monthly users or 10,000 business users in the EU. So that obviously describes Facebook and Google and Apple, etc., as well as Amazon. Now, this legislation, as I mentioned, has not yet passed. A finalized version is yet to be officially adopted by the EU Parliament, as well as the 27 countries that make up the EU. Now, according to Margrethe Vestager, this is the EU's competition chief, she said she expects the rules to come into force sometime in October, and she compared this new DMA to historic antitrust reforms to the banking, energy, and telecom sectors. And so the question is, what does this really mean for big tech? Now, according to CNBC, a key aim of the reforms is to prevent tech giants from abusing their market position to harm smaller rivals. This is something we've talked about extensively here in the United States as well. Large internet companies that are often criticized for operating quote-unquote walled gardens, meaning closed systems that make it harder for users to ditch one provider for another, is essentially what the target is here. You ever try switching from Google to Office 365 or back, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Not to mention the fact that, you can move to a smaller social media platform that quote-unquote competes with Facebook, but they've got 1 million users compared to the billions that Facebook has. Now, firms that qualify as gatekeepers will be required to avoid basically setting their most important software, so for example, Google Chrome's web browser, as a default option when a user sets up their device, meaning you're setting up that Android. Now, Google won't be able to say, hey, use Chrome as a default. You might be able to use a competing browser on your phone. I recommend Brave. Now, they will also be prohibited from giving preference to their own services over other. This is something that Microsoft got in trouble for with Windows, and they got sued here in the United States when they were integrating back in the day Internet Explorer into Windows, and essentially that was the huge option, which is what prompted Netscape to sue them in basically the beginning of the browser wars. Now, in addition to all of that, gatekeepers must also ensure interoperability, or the ability for different apps to work with each other between instant messaging services. So this could mean that Apple's iMessage platform would be forced to exchange data with Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or anything else there. Now, the consequences for breaking the rules could be severe. Gatekeepers that violate the DMA face potential fines of up to 10% of their global revenue, not just their EU revenue, and that is a key difference because obviously while the EU is a massive market, the Googles of the world make a ton of money outside the EU, as they make a ton of money in pretty much every continent they're in, which is all of them. I'm sure there's like 6 penguins using Google in Antarctica as well. Now, for repeat offenders, this will increase to 20% of global revenue, and to put that into context, that could be as much as of right now $23 billion US for a company like Meta. Meta, aka Facebook, has been a repeat violator of absolutely everything, so there you go. They would be paying through the nose. Now, gatekeepers that break the rules at least 3 times in 8 years risk facing market investigation and, if necessary, quote unquote, behavioral or structural remedies, including possible breakups of companies. Now, this is something that I think a lot of us have here in the United States have called for, not to mention stricter privacy controls, which the EU also have. They're known as GDPR. A few states like California, Illinois, to some extent, New York have this, but we don't have anything collectively here across all 50 states, from the federal government regarding our privacy. So these are huge things. Essentially, what we are looking at are these structural changes, are these potentials to essentially hinder the market dominance that a Google or an Apple or a Facebook has. And I think, quite frankly, competition is a good thing. And as we look to, let's say, evolve the web, into, let's say, Web 3.0, which a lot of people are talking about, breaking up this social media dominance by these just few handful of companies is a good thing. And obviously there will be people that will have their own axes to grind, meaning I was censored on Facebook, we should have completely uncensored things. There's so many different arguments that go into basically arguments like this or debates like this. But I think overall this is ultimately a good thing. If we're not going to stifle innovation, then we need to see innovative companies. Now, we're not necessarily saying everybody, is going to have an equal result, but having an equal starting line is kind of hard these days because you've got behemoths, multi-billion or trillion-dollar corporations that essentially run the starting line or are several lengths ahead of you as you're in the starting line, but we're at least giving them a shot. We're at least giving smaller businesses a shot to basically really be innovative. And I think by virtue of that, we may have a better Apple. We may have a better Facebook. We may have a better something else. We're not going to know until we let them try, or making sure they're not simply purchased and then rolled into another one of the behemoths. That's another thing that really wasn't mentioned in CNBC. So we'll see what happens. I think this is interesting news. I think overall in the long run, this is good news in terms of competitiveness, but also for innovation in technology. So we'll see where that happens. That is your interesting news of the day. And right on EU. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter, where they both have basic market dominance at Nick A. ESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube, owned by Google, who has market dominance. And please, as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.